So I would imagine this question is dealing with like human sensory and the concept of just human sensory projection as a whole. So what does that mean? Well, when we perceive something, when we hear something, are we hearing it, or is it creating a sound for us to hear? In other words, is there an objective, non-human aspect to human senses? Like if when we perceive that there is a tree there, if we did not have eyesight, would there be a tree there? Well, and no one else was viewing it. Who knows? That's the great question of this time-old question that we are asking. If a tree falls, in other words, does it make a sound, or does the brain hear it? In other words, are we programmed to create a sound for the tree, or is the tree emanating a sound to us? Is the tree creating the sound, or are we creating the sound? So a natural scientist will say this: well, of course, the tree is creating the sound. It's creating a vibration, a wavelength that your ear is then picking up on. That wavelength is there due to the tree falling. If the tree had not fallen, you would not hear that wavelength. Okay, but the reality is that we're talking about the most fine-tuned aspect of this. We're talking about at the core zeitgeist of our perception. Not the core zeitgeist, I apologize. The core of our perception. Is this tree, in fact, implicating a sound upon our ears? This deals very much so with like the core bios of our being, in a sense. So at our core essence, in our core nature, are our perceptions real or imaginary? Is the core of our mind created to implicate certain sounds in certain scenarios, or are those sounds objectively real? Like the sound of a tree that a tree makes to me may be very different than what it causes to a bat, which responds to its sonar, sees that something's there, sees that something's in motion. It's a very different perception. So is our sound, is our reaction to it, is it an objective reality? What is the objective reality? Were we able to pull ourselves out to a fourth or fifth dimensional perspective? What is the objective reality of what that tree is doing with no perspective bias? Is there a way to understand what a scenario, what is happening with no perspective bias? From the time you are in the womb, from the time you develop ears, you are hearing your parents' voices. You're responding to certain sounds in different ways. You're hearing your parents interact in a certain degree with one another. You're hearing maybe your father raises his voice and your mother raises her voice. You're hearing certain dynamics of sound exchanges that are mirrored from the wild. This also deals with human beings' relationship to nature. Are human beings a part of nature or truly separate from nature? As humans, we think of ourselves as separate, right? But is that just the great lie that our perspective gives to us? Do we think we have a higher perspective from our other Animalia twins, and by having this conversation about how we could have a higher perspective, we have a higher perspective? But the reality is that we have no greater perspective from them, that we merely are limited by our sensory organisms, that our perspective is only what has been given to us at the core